Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at the World Blitz Championship 2019 match against Hikaru Nakamura and Giri. Again, as always, if you like this video, slap that like button, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and hit the notifications bell to get notified about new content on my channel. But without further ado, let's get into it. So Hikaru is with the white pieces